If you look at things as black and white, then it can be a very frustrating career because there's value in process. So even the deals that you do not end up doing build a lot of skill. There's wisdom that you develop and an eye for success factors that you build over time and patterns that you get to bring and fresh lens to the next deal. Even better with tenured teams because you have that comparative base together.
My guest today is a multi-billion rand transactor and deal maker, from arranging debt to equity and everything in between, from greenfields projects to exit. She serves on the board of Dischem Pharmacies, AdCorp Holdings, and MedAir Investments. She's a trustee of the Altron Foundation and a Reed Educational Trust board member. Today, she leads Canva Investments, a 100% Black women-owned private markets investments holding company that partners with owner-managed businesses to drive superior financial returns while generating meaningful non-financial impact. She is Alupheli Sithebe. Alu, thank you for making time and joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be with you this afternoon.
Alu, take us back to the beginning. Growing up in Mthatha, what was growing up there like, and what did your community expect of you or expect you to become one day?
So I was born in Mthatha. My first decade of life was pre 1994 in the context of the struggle for liberation. During that time, I mean, at a micro lens, I was part of a big family, as where back in those days, most families were large. I am the fourth or fifth of five children. So my life was really filled with a lot of joyful play, trusted neighbors around me, resounding songs of the struggle for liberation, church and choir practices in between. Very much a close knit community with a focus on freedom. That was the language of the day. At a macro lens, there was an expectation that all of us as children in our family would play a role in contributing to a better South Africa. I think that there were many forms of activism at the time, not only through the underground liberation movement, whether it's storytelling, whether it was reading or writing about our culture, it was a form of defiance to elevate the relevance of Black people in their cause within the country. But our family chose education as a route for upward mobility, which would allow us and empower us to be able to drive the agenda of equality and have influence to make a better South Africa for all.
That's lovely. And your interest in you in the financial services sector now, your interest started at a very young age, I believe, with your first junior bob card.
Yes, indeed. You'd laugh. My mother had different hopes. As a nurse, she had hoped that we would be doctors and pharmacists in the family. Now and then, she would listen to us sing carefully to see if there was a chorister or potential opera singer, as she was an avid chorister at the time. It was not to be. All of us ended up going to university in the family, but none of us in the arts. But back to the junior bob card. So, my interest really was driven by seeing people around me manage very limited resources. And by design, the apartheid era was such that resources were not equitably shared. So families, including my own, had to work with limited capital and prioritize that capital allocation for that limited resource to lasting impact spend. And a lot of that was centered around education. So we never had a bookshelf empty. We had monthly deliveries from different reading institutions. We had library cards. But more than watching the discipline around money, there were things around the community we would see. You would see an insurance broker with a briefcase knocking on a door, coming to sell insurance, and I would want to know, what does he mean? Then there'd be a funeral, and you'd see people talking about claiming for cover or insurance to cover the costs. You would also experience stock sell clubs around you, but also as financial deepening took place in the country. I must have been 7 or 8. I got my first junior bob card. The whole family was banking with FNB. My sisters, all the sisters got their bob T cards. So it was quite an interesting time to graduate from the piggy bank on my bedside to actually banking the money and understanding how capital is preserved, how it's kept, saved, how it moves, and how it's grown. And that's where the conversation around interest started.
Lovely, lovely. You mentioned books and library cards. Reading was is has always been very important for you, and now you champion reading for meaning.
That's correct. A project I'm very passionate about. And I think the big part of it is that if you look at the studies that happen globally and the benchmark that South Africa uses is the Pearl study. So it's the Progress in International Reading and Literature Study. It's undertaken every 5 years. The last one came out in 2021 with quite adverse findings. What it does, it looks at the ability of 10-year-olds, which in South Africa are grade fours, their capacity to read for meaning, that is comprehension. And the study found that South African 10-year-olds were unable to read for meaning 80% in any language. So it didn't just use English uh, for me, even if Zulu children reading Zulu, for example. So it was quite famed that it used the mother tongue to benchmark, but the comprehension level was not, was only proven to be up to standard for about 20% of our grade four children, which is quite concerning because, as you would know, after the junior primary phase, educational content does become more difficult, the more complex concepts of math, science, your STEM subjects, that compounds. And if you don't have the right foundation to be able to read for meaning, you may lose the wherewithal to pursue those study routes, which are very important in matching skills with the digital age.
That is very powerful. I mean, even a complex subjects like maths and science requires comprehension. You got to understand the problem, the question.
Correct, correct. And what READ does is really get to the grassroots level from grade March by firstly training the teachers, partnering for 3 years with schools to roll out effective reading materials and resources, but also supports the school in ensuring that over time there is a level of teaching that does achieve the objective of being able to comprehend all material.
Okay, with the work that the Reed Foundation is doing, are you seeing a positive change?
We are seeing a positive change, just not enough. I think if you think of all the dynamics within the country, you've got schools in remote areas that have limited resources, teachers. So the effectiveness of teaching itself structurally is quite challenged from a resource perspective. But what is positive is that we are seeing corporates in South Africa pay a lot of attention to the reading crisis. I think we understand that reading and education is a national issue. It's a ticking time bomb. So we've been seeing a lot of generosity from the donor community to expand these interventions. But not only that, another organization I work with, you mentioned the Altron Foundation. So the Altron established an educational trust, which is ICT focused. And what it seeks to do is increase the number of individuals that have access to STEM education, thus matching resources. But the sad part is that it's too late to intervene at that level if you don't have the throughput from junior school all the way to high school. Unfortunately, matric, by the time we have South African matrics right, we've lost about 33% to 40% of students, they drop out. We also have only 34% writing pure maths. So it's quite important that the work that happens at the top level is supported by the work at the bottom level. And there has been positive developments from the capital space. We have seen some deal activity. We saw a major delisting on the JSE of a school call to a PBO, and the thinking is that there will be expansion and greater access to quality education from that change in ownership. There has been activity in terms of private equity deals as well, where large institutions like Old Mutual Alternative Investments buying a school's portfolio, and the thinking is again expansion and providing that access. So it will take time, but I think it is getting the necessary attention because it is a national priority for our youth and for the future of the country.
Wonderful. If somebody listening wants to get involved, either in an individual or a business corporate capacity, what should they do?
They should contact us at Read. We do have online presence. Just search Read Educational Trust. And we do have contact us pages for us to be able to engage further on the work that we do.
Excellent. Okay. So, growing up, did you realize one day you wanted to be a CA, or did it all just happen? How did you end up at Ernst& Young?
Yeah, so quite interesting. I mean, just talking around the fact that South Africa has the highest youth unemployment rate, I was alive to the challenges of employment. I was alive to the need to be a mainstream participant in the South African economic environment. So I was aware of careers that would earn one the ability to occupy spaces that made very important decisions, but also, if you look at the CA career in my time, I recall when we completed with my cohort, we were in the first 1,000 Black women in the country to become CAs. So that demand side dynamic does come with a certain level of opportunity and power. But it was important, I think, that with where the country was, that we aim to achieve goals that can move the dial for the upliftment of firstly society through the work that one does. There was a glaring gap in the skill, but also our own community, the ability to provide more, inspire more, and the like. So it was a demand supply dynamic primarily, but the interest that had been sparked had really made me appreciate money and see how important it is to have. And I think when I looked at my parents and what they achieved with money, I always thought, sure, it's so interesting what with so little they were able to do so much. And I put that to the test at the age of 11 when I went to boarding school, when I had to manage my Bob T card, my junior Bob card limited budget. So I learned a lot about financial discipline. So I think it just got into my DNA and it's something that I wanted to be in control of, purely because I think economically, there was so much disadvantage where I came from.
Excellent. And Ernst& Young at the time, was it a big break moment for you?
So very, very interesting journey. I think if you think of the CA profession, and I think people who would have qualified in the 2000s would recall that you would do your undergraduate degree in accounting, which still is the case. And then you would have to do your fourth year, which is honors, but it was specifically for CA stream called CTA, for example, at WOW. UCT had another term for it, but it's a special honors program for people going the CA route. And essentially, you write four major subjects that are related to the discipline, and you have to pass them. It's all or nothing. If you don't pass them, you go back the next year. You write the four again. If you don't pass it, or you pass three of them, you don't get a credit, you write again. So I unfortunately didn't pass my first attempt at those honors. So it had been a very good undergraduate experience, smooth sailing. And then in 2005, when I was doing my honors, I experienced a significant life event. Unfortunately, my sister, so we now four, no longer five in our family, passed away. So there are a lot of distractions and just difficult moments in that year that made it difficult for me. And I set 75% there, but almost didn't count. So we had to make the decision around what happens. Do I go back full time? And I had a conversation with my parents who said, if you do go back full time, we think you should get a study loan because all along we'd been supporting you, but I had a younger sibling as well that they were looking after. So I had to make some calls. So I talked to EY and I say, EY, we've spoken. You're aware that I've sent my results through. The idea was for me to start working for you, but unfortunately, I haven't passed the test. And traditionally, every single person starting their articles would have also passed their honors. So EY challenged some norms. looked at the results and said, "You're literally very close, but the system is such that you cannot write your board exams, but nothing stops us from taking you in to come work while you repeat. So you do it part time." There was a lot of execution risks there. Not only did I still have to pass all of them, but I was overlaying work, a full day of work on the same limited time that every mortal has. So I then spoke to my parents about it and said, "I've thought about it. I'm going to start working. There's a lot of risk because if it doesn't work out and I don't pass, I'll probably have to go back to university to do it properly and focus on it. But at the same time, I think there is a way of getting it right. I was quite close. I would need to maintain a certain cadence to make this thing fail proof. And part of that would be infrastructure requirements to ensure that I'm not distracted in any way. And that's when I had the conversation with my dad to say, what does that look like? And I said I would need a car. That's something he said he wouldn't buy for me in the university because he said he'd never buy a car for a student because the insurance, maintenance, and everything is on him. But he said, "You're still a student." And I said, "Well, technically, but I work, but the jury is out as to what happens next year. But I'm going to make sure that I pass and I stay in this opportunity." So the car was needed to make sure that I had no inefficiencies. I told him my plan. I would wake up, go to work, drive home 6 to 10, doing this, and public transport wouldn't get me there. And I can't wait until I save. Um, Article clerks don't get much money. At the time, you also needed 10% deposit. So my dad was not comfortable with the idea, but he believed in my story and I was willing to back myself. I made certain undertakings and I had to commit to the process. It was the most difficult year of my life. And it worked out. I passed the honors program, all four. I finished my first year of articles, and the next day I wrote both board exams. So that was my journey with EY, a place that gave me an opportunity. That was rare, the first unprecedented, but also an opportunity for me to test my limits and my ability to operate under uncertainty.
Excellent. Now, EY most likely saw something in you that we're all seeing today.
There was a growing company, there was a lot of demand for skills. And I think you couldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater just because somebody got 75% of their pass. So therefore, they did see value, and I think it's a different way of looking at value, which taught me a lot as well.
And the deal you did with your dad, did it work out for him as well?
It panned out because I did honor my part of the deal. I was out of the system of being a student end of that year, and he didn't have to worry about me abandoning work to go back and do CTA, which was CA honors full time because I had said to him that I'm married to the CA program and I'm going to make sure that I finish it. So I stood by my word. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and, that's excellent. And then the opportunity came about to see the bull in Wall Street, if I'm not mistaken. I think you told me the with
Yes.
Ernst and Young, which didn't quite work out. What happened
Didn't
there?
quite work out. So second year of EY was the best year. I wrote the board exams, as I said, passed both of them. And most people who did the CA stream would recall that in the third year, you complete your hours of training. And then right at the very end, around December, actually, you get to go overseas and work on an exchange program. And that's the perk of serving articles with a global firm. So in 2008, that was the plan. I was set to go to the US, either New York, the global financial capital, or San Francisco, the startup new era place to be.
Silicon Valley.
That's right. That's right. So around September 2008, the firm spoke to us and said they wouldn't be taking us on exchange. If anything, most companies, including UI USA, were scaling back.
Sure, it was the global financial
Global
crisis at the
financial
time.
crisis,
Yeah.
yes, at the peak of it. So I had to make a plan B. So the leap from EY was driven by the fact that I knew I was not passionate about auditing. It's a foundation that I still apply today that I'm ever so grateful for and was so critical in just forming the basis of my career. But I knew that I didn't want to practice and specialize in audit, so I never expressed an interest to stay. What I did know is that when I come back from my 6 months overseas, I would have had time to actually frame what sector I want to go to with a decorated CV that has international exposure, of course, from San Francisco or the USA. So it was a lot of excitement building up towards that very moment to come back to local market, but it was not to be. It meant that I've got a few
You had to
months to
fast track your
decide.
plan.
That's right. And then when I was signed off in December, I activated my plan B, which was to go on my own and sell what I had, a CASA qualification and auditing and accounting training with one of the big four global firms.
Brilliant. And that's when you launched Canva Investments or
Canva
Canva
Advisory at the
Advisory. That
time.
was the version
Correct.
108, right? 2008,
2008. Well, I completed my article December 2008 and I registered Canva Advisory.
2009.
That's right.
And you were attracted to SMEs, right?
Correct. So if one thinks about the regulatory backdrop at the time, so 2008 is before the New Companies Act. So a lot of companies were CCs, but if you were PTY, you needed to be audited. So there was quite a market for smaller businesses, which were PTYs, to be audited. And a lot of companies that wanted to benefit at the time from the growth, particularly the preferential procurement aspect. So new market entrants wanted formalized structures. They wanted to be PTYs. So they needed to be audited. So audit readiness, but not only that, you needed to have growth capital readiness. And what that meant is that you needed to have proper management accounts, but also draft business plans, be able to talk to financiers, and actually take advantage of the opportunities that were there. So that was the market that I played in because I've always believed in the capacity of small businesses to move the dial in terms of economic growth, job creation. You look everywhere, even your more mature markets or advanced markets, UK, US, more than 60% of jobs come from SMEs. South Africa is no different. So that is a space that I was quite curious and excited to work in.
Excellent. And there's many out there, me included, that did the leap from corporate, and many wonder, whether they should or shouldn't. Tell us, what was the first year being out of now the comforts of corporate? What was 2009 like?
Yeah, 2000, it was quite interesting because there was a push factor to it, right? It wasn't by design or the plan, it was a plan B. But what I realized firstly about that decision in Q4 2008, my third year of articles, was that I had underestimated um, the development that I underwent in my first year of articles, that uncertainty, managing risk, executing on something that was unprecedented, that I couldn't entirely control the outcome of, that it had actually prepared me for this kind of choice. I just had developed that muscle to figure out certain things. So yes, it was scary, it was new, but somewhat familiar. The one drawback was that because I hadn't had the time to plan it as my plan A, I went into it with a survivalist approach. So take all the work you can so you have an income without a clear strategy around what I want Canva advisory to exactly be. I understood there was an opportunity that I would get work, but there's more to building a business than doing that. I ended up being inundated because without a strategy and a plan, you don't say no all the time as much as you should, and probably you should say no more than you say yes. But I didn't have a framework that guided my decision making, so I was inundated, and I lost a lot in terms of not appreciating that focus is power, which is something I apply in my work now. So the first year was difficult, but then after realizing these rookie eras, I then went into a focused work stream where I was mainly preparing businesses for investability and audit readiness, which is work that I quite enjoyed.
Do you have a sounding board in that first year? Someone to talk to about what you're going through?
I did. I did. I was a beneficiary of the African Women Chartered Accountants mentorship program. Some from as early as second year of my articles. And at the time when I was at EY, EY was the home of AWCA. They'd offered a space for the body. So it was quite helpful to have that kind of support. But what I hadn't realized is that when you are changing in your career or business interests, you probably also want to tap into advisors, like minded people. I hadn't spent the time. I had put my head down on billable hours instead of strategizing, including creating that ecosystem.
Yeah, look, it's quite normal. You know, you get, especially if it was a plan B, this is the situation. You've got the skills, the qualifications, maybe even the network, excuse me, that you become opportunistic. Were there some wrong moves you made in terms of the wrong clients or the wrong partnerships or something that you wish you saw then? Yeah.
I think by virtue of not saying no to enough, I'm not saying no enough, you end up having more work than capacity. So to deliver, I did get into partnerships, but I don't feel that I did enough work planning upfront the nature of partnerships that I would want, and also ensuring the quality and standard of working methods to be able to ensure that I don't get uneven outcomes. Unfortunately, a lot of partnerships, some of the partnerships were not successful. And I think the big part of it was not planning properly for Canva. So I learned that lesson. By the time I got to my third year, I had actually focused my business and I knew how I wanted to work and who I wanted to work with. And I was saying no a lot more to be able to have space for the drawing board.
I just picked up two powerful lessons in what you just said in that first year of the entrepreneurial journey. Focus is power and planning. It's critical. A business plan.
Absolutely. And I think as a knowledge worker, you always want your time to be productive. But those billable hours, as much as you chase them to get the work done, if you don't structure it properly up front, it's like project management, you pay the price later. So I learned that quite early on. Yeah,
Reminds, yeah, I had a similar journey there. You know, you learn that busyness doesn't always mean success. You know, sometimes pausing to plan and think is more precious hours spent than, you know, business development or trying to get involved in an opportunity.
absolutely. Absolutely. And I learned that later. That you have to slow down, create the space to ideate. And that what it does, it empowers you with the ability to discern what you should be doing after you've done that. And when many opportunities come, you're able to say no with conviction.
Absolutely.
Oh, yes, as well, with
As well,
conviction.
yeah, yeah. Yes, with the knowledge and the awareness. So true. There's nothing worse than having the wrong clients or the wrong partnerships because it can be draining, right? Heavy on fuel.
Very much so. Very much so. And reputationally risky because you obviously want to uphold a certain standard that you bring to your advisory role. It's very important work. There's a relationship of trust, professional skepticism, and skills that you bring to the table, and you never want to dilute that by entering into a relationship or work sharing arrangement that was not properly DD'd upfront.
Right. Well, yeah, look, that's the only way to learn these things is when you're swimming in the deep end.
That's right. Yes. So I paid my school fees. Yes. But one thing I was sure about is my love for working with SMEs, my role in financial services in getting companies more advanced in terms of maturity from their financial systems point of view, but also their bankability point of view.
Excellent. And then at which point did you go to serving SA Inc. as a deal maker at IDC?
Yeah, so very interesting story. Still post the global financial crisis, I think the market in general was quite
Cautious.
cautious. Absolutely, I think banks were looking for safe investments. So capital would be going to gold, silver, money markets, US dollar based reserves, and less so of your riskier capital, which startups technically or small businesses or growth capital is perceived as. So you have guys who, on the other hand, have opportunities to do more work. They've got the empowerment credentials. They've started businesses. They're building track record. They've got limited access to growth capital. And then here comes IDC saying we take a counter-cyclical long-term view, and it's in their DNA. It was formed in the 40s around World War II. So this for them was no different. So they were actually quite active in the market. And I quite liked that approach, the long-term view, the patient capital, but the decisiveness that we will take risk in a calculated fashion. And I said, I want to be a part of this. It's so impactful. And talking to the IDC, then I realized that they actually have a formal program where they take deal makers through a cadet program for 12 months to train to understand the craft of deal making, the depth of risk assessment needed in an environment like IDC that obviously takes more risk. And it's something that I immediately signed up for. And I joined the IDC cadet program in 2011, August, where I spent 12 months. Yeah.
All right. Wow. It was just after the World Cup in SA and it was a lot of buzz, eh?
That's correct. That's correct. And they had done plenty of work as well, investing in some of the activity to capacitate the country towards the World Cup. Yeah,
It was a time when our electricity was a lot cheaper also, eh?
that's correct. That's correct. Yeah, yeah. Things have changed a lot since then.
We need to be careful of attracting big industries nowadays.
So IDC did play a big role in that. I think the renewable energy program, the REAP program. That's one of the big initiatives that IDC was quite actively involved in. And I enjoyed how they were able to build a center of excellence around green finance to the extent that some of the deals we did were quite ahead of their times. I mean, I recall we had bilateral relationships with some European institutions that will provide capital at concessionary rates and will blend that capital for clients who are willing to, if, for example, they'd walked into IDC to renew, to replace their equipment or upgrade their manufacturing concern, if they were looking at more environmentally friendly options or more energy efficient options that actually have access to that green capital. So it was quite nice to be able to get involved in those things even as far back as 10, 15 years
Wow,
ago.
you were a pioneer in the just transition that's gathering momentum, only in recent years.
Yeah, that's correct. So there was some very good. There were some very exciting deals we did at the IDC. Yeah,
And you also worked across sectors and across the continent.
that's right. Cross sectors across the continent, deals large and small, and that's the beauty of IDC. You mentioned the multi-billion rand of deals cumulatively, all a blend. But across the continent, one deal that comes to mind is us as the IDC issuing a line of credit to one of East Africa's largest trade financiers. And that trade finance institution actually had a footprint of 25 countries within the AU member states, just for us to be able to see those billions that we approved, not just have an impact in East Africa, but actually have so much reach, 25 countries wide, through this partnership was something quite special. And then, I mean, here at home, on a very close to my heart level, we funded, and I still follow this business, we founded a carve out from one of South Africa's large packaging groups. They were rationalizing their portfolio, carving out some non core assets to manage debt after following to Africa that was not so successful. And the one thing about this deal, it was a classic In private equity, normally carve-outs, buybacks are quite good because you can immediately see, or delistings, where you can save the costs. So the ability to remove yourself from a listed company already, you know that there's a level of savings from management fees, environment that you can realize, but also the freedom of the new owners to not be attached from a procurement point of view to group practices, but to be more entrepreneurial. But I think the highlight with this one is that it was an MBO. We facilitated a historically disadvantaged individual who would ordinarily have not been able to purchase that type of business. We facilitated his ownership into a company that had benefited from best in class corporate governance by being part of a listed company, but also a clear investment thesis that he could immediately execute on because he understood, knew the asset, seamless continuity and security of jobs and people because they knew that they were working together and carrying on the vision to the next level. But also, I think something that we put to work from a legislative part is that South Africa had created the Black Industrialist Program. The DTI in particular and the IDC was able to tap into those funds to be able to meet the barrier to entry that a lot of owners in South Africa are not able to. A lot of aspirant owners of businesses in South Africa are not able to meet, particularly historically disadvantaged individuals who don't have capital to meet the equity check. You will go ask for capital, you want to buy a business, you understand the business, you're a great jockey. And the banks will say, we'll give you 60, 70%, bring some skin in the game. And the reality is that most people don't have that.
Before we go on, I should tell you I started this channel to share the real stories behind the climb for the next generation of leaders and builders coming up. Now, if that's something you believe in too, please subscribe and come along for the ride. It's free and it means a lot. Okay, let's continue. Alu, so for someone who's never seen a deal up close, what does a deal maker actually do day to day?
Very good question. Deal making is such um, a long a cycle. First, there's the evaluation of the transaction itself, all the way to actually doing the transaction and deploying capital. But after our capital is deployed, it's to then ensure that the capital does what it's sought to achieve from the evaluation stage. So the life of a deal maker basically is you look at the story because every single business and where it finds itself as a story. So you will have somebody come in and say, I need capital, and you as the deal maker will need to understand what all. And that's typically articulated in the form of a business plan or an investment memorandum or information memorandum. And that information will talk to why the capital is sought and what it seeks to do. So the deal maker's role is to gauge the viability of the story. Is there really a market? And if this capital is deployed, is there a need for this business when it does have this capital, invest in this, let's say, equipment, manufacture the widgets? Is there a real market for them at the right pricing to have a real bottom line for a business to continue to create jobs, to pay taxes, to pay debt? So it's quite involved. But even before you have the businesses that you are looking at to fund, there's an origination aspect, which is quite popular in private equity because unlike the IDC where people walk in private equity, a lot of the relationships that you have will determine the deals that you get. Because it's a long-term partnership, it's typically a party buying in. So, for example, Gamba will buy in, and we need to ensure that I am the partner the business needs, but also the chemistry between myself and the incumbent shareholders makes sense, and that the reason why they're selling matches my reason for purchasing. So it's evaluating all those aspects, but more than anything, in a typical deal making environment where most deal makers will start in banking or development finance, you will be stress testing financial models. You will be doing a lot of research. We'll be tapping into your network's intelligence to validate some assumptions. And once you've gained confidence around a real business case existing and undertaken a due diligence to confirm a lot of the facts centered around the jockeys, the company itself, and the customer it serves, there's the big event called investment committee or credit.
You got to sell it internally.
Got to sell it internally. So that time, it gives you an opportunity, your own growth around what is the business case, but also what the world and market needs, because ultimately business is there to serve a certain need. So you basically submit yourself to interrogation, but also it's an opportunity to show your belief in what this business is doing for society and the economy at large.
And you're in that interesting space between almost representing the borrower, but also representing the investor or even the shareholder, if you will.
That's correct.
The deal maker sits in the middle.
Sits in the middle.
Yeah. And you can get it from both sides if you get it wrong, eh?
That's correct. That's correct. So that's why you've got to be so clear about the objectives, because they ultimately need to serve both parties, financier as well as the business and the market it serves. And then that's where the work truly begins. After you've got your approval, a deal, some deals take long. Let's say you do take a year on the longish type of deal. The real work begins after, because you've got 5 years of the instrument. That if you use debt, normally the repayment period is 5 years. If you're in private equity, the investment horizon is at least 5 to 7 years. And you may be investing because the business needs growth capital, and the capital that you invest is used to increase production capacity or the like, or upgrade, let's say, technology. Then during the next 5, 7 years, you need to ensure that those plans come into fruition. With the best laid plans, no one could have foreseen the war that's currently happening, supply chain challenges, COVID pandemic. So you need strong oversight to be able to ensure that the business can withstand the challenges that will certainly come in most investment horizons. And that's where the role of post-investment oversight in the form of board seats come in. Typically, investors, you want to be on the board. But not only that, the level of reporting you'll expect monthly. You also have to report to your own investors. So for myself as Canva, I receive capital from funders who support my business to be able to invest in companies. I have to report to them around how my portfolio is doing, but also be part of realizing the promises made in the business plans around whether it's growth, making sure that that market access that would increase top line is achieved and done, in supporting the companies accordingly, managing people, succession planning. So it's quite involved. And that's where the real hard work comes in.
Wonderful. And before we get into the Canva investment story, you really over 6 years cut your teeth as a deal maker, so to say, at the IDC, and then you had a very illustrious executive career. You sat Your first board seat was at age 37. That's remarkable.
So following my time at the IDC, doing a wide array of deals and getting a lot of deal exposure, I then made the decision to move on to private equity, which is very much entrepreneurial. Whereas a team of private equity, as you typically get equity positions. So I was principal of African Phoenix Investments Limited before getting those board roles. It was a listed investment company, but reflective of the wide sector trend of small cap and a few mid cap companies on the JSE. It's subsequently delisted, but during the time it was active, myself and three partners co founded a private equity fund that looked after this business. What was unique about this company is that it was the first of its kind to have the level of women representation that it had. And this is at the backdrop of an asset management industry that has about 20% of female representation currently. And then in terms of the JSE itself, women representation is still quite limited at senior management and senior role levels. So spending time in this venture prepared me quite well for the listed markets. because as much as we're doing private equity, we were doing it within the context of the listed space as our fundraising stroke LP pool. So when I got my first board roles, I had listed experience from this previous venture, but it felt quite organic because the roles that I got were very much linked to my core expertise. One company was in retail. I had spent 3 years at EY auditing in the retail and consumer products division. But not only that, it was undergoing acquisitive growth. And that's a strategy that I understand from my own full time work as an investment professional. And the other company was in an expansionary phase, undergoing a greenfields development, which is now its largest subsidiary in its cluster of companies. So that involvement as well spoke quite closely to my core competencies, but nonetheless, very much a much larger responsibility. I wouldn't say that I felt at that point at 37 that I could be a director or an NED in any company, but these two companies that I referred to were appropriate for my skill set and the time that they found themselves in terms of what they required.
So having that alignment with your skill set sort of gives you the confidence at that young age.
That's right. I think the confidence comes from competence. And I think if you align your activities with your areas of competence, it's a natural progression, but nonetheless, a big role that requires a huge focus of mind.
Love that. Confidence comes with competence. Nice message. Speaking of messages, for a young 20 something African woman studying finance and wants to be a board member like you, what's your advice to them?
Yeah, so maybe it starts with the why. Why are you studying finance? I think for me, I studied finance to be a CAs because CAs felt fetched a certain level of market respect and rapport, could be trusted with big decisions. Within those decisions, I knew I could make a difference. You could get inclusivity. You've got diversity that you are able to include as part of your ESG strategy, particularly in private equity when we invest. We look at the financial aspects, but we also look at the ESG impact you want to have on a business as you audit. So you know your why. And if your why is that, inevitably, then those rooms where decisions are made, which is boardrooms, you will end up in. And for me, that was just the natural progression to based on where the choices I made earlier on.
Hmm. But it feels very out of reach for most people. What would be your advice in terms of getting closer to being considered for a board seat? What should they focus on in terms of their development?
Yeah, so I mean, if you look at boards, maybe we should just talk about the very thinking around boards. So, from an investment perspective, which is where I started being on boards, it was to exercise oversight over the plans that would roll for the next 5 to 7 years of investment, whether it was debt or equity. The closeness to that needed somebody to be on the board, and that's how I ended up being in that situation. But if you look at the non-executive directorships that have independent boards, particularly the listed markets, you've got an agency theory challenge to solve for. So you've got shareholders who invest in these listed companies, retail investors, pension funds, etc., but they don't run the companies.
Explain agency theory for those listening.
So essentially, agency theory is that the owners of companies are not the runners of companies. And to ensure fair play, you need people in between, which are the independent non executive directors, to ensure that the interests of the investors who do not see the business day to day are being carried out by the management team. It's human nature to have conflicts. It's human nature to have a self interest at times. And what the board of directors does is ensure that the business is run in the best interests of not just the shareholders, but other stakeholders at large. There's the environment, there's communities to think about, because sustainable businesses have to consider all these levers, all these stakeholders, but also the way it conducts business, the strategy that shareholders bought into when investing needs to be carried through. So the board plays both the role of oversight, but also collective wisdom. And that comes from the fact that, as I said before, with the best laid out plans, over a 5, 10 year horizon, things may change. And the jockeys that are in the role, by nature of business, it's quite complex. You've got legal, you've got operational, you've got financial. There's very few people who know it all. Now, having a board means that in a season where a company, for example, is struggling with legal matters, on the board, you do have a diversity of skills, then they're able to tap in for that context into that collective wisdom to avoid catastrophic losses. But at the same time, ensuring that all interests for all stakeholders are being carried out in a fashion that benefits everyone else and not just to the management team that's making the day to day decisions. So if you have a skill and that skill is relevant to business, you can sit on a board, because boards require people who bring a diversity of thought and skills that advances all stakeholder interests and the business's interests itself.
Right, right. It's traditionally always been very glamorous to be on the board, but it's you have to be prepared to assume a lot of responsibility as well, right?
That is correct. That is correct. Which is why, in sitting on a board, it's got to be a business that you understand, but it's also got to be an environment where you feel you can add value and increase the chances of success for that business. Otherwise, neither you or the business are benefiting from the relationship, nor is the management team if they can't tap into your intelligence for something that is quite critical and important to the business itself. So it's not just about sitting on a board, it's bringing value to an environment that requires your skill set for that company's context.
Great. For the young CA out there or aspirant CA, beyond the technical and financial skills, what's your advice in terms of be it interpersonal skills or other skills? What should they be working on to prepare them?
Yeah, so particularly for deal making, deals can take long. Deals can be unpredictable. They can wind. They can be successful. Sometimes they fall through. So you've got to be able to handle complexity, uncertainty, and also live with varied outcomes. And what I realized with that calmness doesn't come naturally. So you've got to be able to tap into something greater than yourself to get through the hard times. People do it differently. Others meditate. I'm a practicing Christian, but I have the capacity um, to understand that today not going well doesn't mean the deal's dead or there is no way of thinking about things differently and mitigating risk. And then another part of it is communication skills, because deals are long term relationships. So you've got to be able to form relationships that withstand time and difficulty in between, tough results, but faith to go back and work together again. And a lot of that takes empathy, mutual respect, grit, and teams that stay together, which is a core requirement for deals to work because you plan something, you get it funded after a great proposal or investment thesis or business plan. Now you've got to see through, there will be some vagaries along the way. But tenured teams who sort of get through that tend to do better over time. And the high performance comes from that tenure of knowing each other and understanding how to deal with things together and the strengths that you individually contribute in environment. So if you think of a team, you've got a team in the company itself. So when you buy into a business. You become part of the team because you're a shareholder, but you also become part of the team because you're part of the board. You sit together and debate problems and approaches and decisions. But within that context, to achieve that high performance, there's got to be trust. But not only trust, there's got to be mutual respect and that empathy that you value what I have to say, and I'm open to being corrected by you because it matters what we all bring and thoughts around the table. And the more diversity you have around the room, you generally have more innovative, more effective solutions. But it's got to come from a place of trust and mutual respect, and those are qualities that you build over time. Because I think when you're younger, being right is quite important, and exams teach you that. But being right and expressing that in a certain way is going to be something that one needs to work on to build trust and lasting relationships.
Well, important skills to learn. Yeah. So patience is the one I picked up because I also experienced, the hit rate in deal making is famously low. Not every, I mean, majority of them you say no to, right? Even as an investor or banks would refuse because it's not value accretive. So it can be disheartening if you don't have that thick skin to look for the next one that works.
Correct. And I think perspective, right? I think if you look at things as black and white, the word deals, and you can take stock of the deals that actually happened, then it can be a very frustrating career because there's value in process. So even the deals that you do not end up doing, that you do not hit, but you see, build a lot of skill. There's wisdom that you develop and an eye for success factors that you build over time and patterns that you get to bring and fresh lens to the next deal. Even better with tenured teams because you have that comparative base together, which then increases your capacity to spot winners. So it's that type of gray that you've got to be able to be comfortable with on the way to the best and the right deal.
It's all part of the growth.
It's all part of the growth.
The adage comes to mind when even when you lose, don't lose the lesson.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct. That's classic deal making.
As we let's come as we close here. Um, let's think of this. Somebody now sitting in corporate that feels I'm in the wrong place and wants to do your 2009 style leap. What's your advice to them? What should they be planning and focusing on? Because I know those two things are important to you.
That's right. Planning, focus is power. And the why of what are you taking to the market. At that point, I did have something that was valuable at the time and still is a CA qualification and a market that required that level of support from the SME point of view. Um, but in my mind, I would say in the long term, what impact do you want to have? Because you will end up in the boardroom if what you're bringing is impactful and compelling. And it comes down to the planning. And I think you don't want to make the leap too soon without having crafted exactly what is that compelling proposition I'm giving to the market and grow it. If you feel that it's not at a level where you can sell it, improve it, nurture it, and take it to market. Because ultimately, people will buy value and quality, but you need to first be able to determine the value proposition yourself.
Great. Any advice on what they should maybe do differently?
So, from what I did, I would definitely say building networks is something that I sort of only probably got right in around my MBA. You don't need to wait that long. It's so important, particularly in deal making, to sound things, to get leads, to co-invest, get certain skills that are important as part of your value creation strategy. So I would say building strong networks very important. And then on the soft skills, even if you don't end up being a deal maker, let's say you position yourself according to what the market most demands now, which is STEM. I would encourage every person to do a personal finance course. Taxes and budgeting affect us all. Especially as a deal maker, you need to be making good deals in your personal capacity before you can be a custodian and a steward of capital. So that's something that one needs to get right and understand very early on. And these days, I think, unlike us who had dial-up internet, um, and had limited content online about how to build communication skills or build EQ, self-awareness, personal finance, understanding tax, understanding budgeting. All this content is available. So perhaps how you use your time and your access to the abundance of internet resources should be targeted at these very skills that are going to be core into the future as well.
Sage advice, Alu. Thank you. And a fun one to close with. Capital is powerful, but the most valuable thing I own is
Time,
time.
my time.
Okay. Yeah, precious, eh?
I wasn't always the case, but now that I do, um, it's been very powerful.
Everyone has this issue. I think that's where stress comes from, eh? Not enough time to do everything. Any advice on how you find that time to for yourself?
For me, time is not just about me. It's time to do the things that are important to me. Um, and I think the way I've structured my life is such that I work, but a lot, and I still have time for my family a lot because they're both important to me. But I've also just set a certain upper limit to how much I will work at the expense, for example, of family or self care. And you need part of a big part of being healthy, making the time to exercise, for example, that is the fuel you need to work more effectively. But working more effectively without the right amount of discipline on family time, for example, means that the very core of your foundation that energizes you, that you work for, is weak. So I've got time because I've decided that I won't say yes to everything. And obviously, that comes at limited economics as well, sometimes because you can't be part of every single lucrative thing. But I'm fine with that because I have time for the things that are important to me.
Thank you. That's great advice. Say no when you need to. Yeah. Alu Sithebe, thank you very much for your time. Very valuable time.
Thank you.
Loved having you here. Thank you. If you've made it all the way here, you're exactly who I made this for. Do me one favor, please. Subscribe so you don't miss the next conversation. It's absolutely free. It'll take a second and it'll mean the world to me. I'll see you in the next episode of Dealmaker Diary.